Hello everyone, I'm Colin. Today I'm going to be answering some questions from some of my subscribers, and some of them are reoccurring questions that I get time and time again. So I'm going to do a video to help people understand why things happen the way they do. And one of the things I'm going to talk about, something new, the Kerf maker on the bandsaw. So that's going to be interesting. So let's get started. A few months ago, I made a blanket statement that there's never any reason that you would need to water down glue. And I have to retract that because apparently there are some odd occasions where you need to water down glue. The best one I heard of is one of my subscribers from Idaho who contacted me, says very, very dry there. And when I'm doing glue ups, he said, when I put the glue on, before I can get the boards together, the glue is already skinning up. But he found that if he can reduce it by 8%, so it makes an 8% solution of glue and water, so it's almost no water in it, but that gives him enough time to put the glue on and glue it together. Somebody else very kindly sent me an article from one of the woodworking magazines on glue sizing, and I read it very carefully, and today we're going to see what kind of difference it makes. And that recipe in the magazine said mix 1 part of glue with 10 parts of water. You can see it's kind of yellowy but very watery. And I've coated some MDF, some wood here, some natural wood, and some end grain, and we're going to take a minute after it's dry and come back and put on some water-based varathane and see what that does, and we're going to put on some Osmo, some oil, and I keep my Osmo in a jar because it skins up when it gets too low in the jar. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll come back after it's on and dry. Okay, so I've coated these, it's been 24 hours, everything's nice and dry, and I have to say right off the bat, I'm pretty disappointed because there's barely a perceptible difference. So here's the end grain, and this is a coating of the varathane, and one side has been sized and one side has not. Can you guess which one has been sized? That's right, the one right there with the S on it. So this board has been sized, this one has not. And I can't really see any difference there. There's really no difference. Let's have a look at the Osmo side. And again, almost no difference all the way across. There's like nothing, no difference. Let's have a look at the natural wood. Now this is red alder, and this area up here has been sized. This is just natural wood, and I don't know if you can see, but there is literally no difference, no matter what angle I put that at. There is basically no difference between, and this is one single piece of board, so it's off the same board, the same piece of wood. And last but not least, on the MDF, I'll put this up so you can see it, and which one? Okay, the top one I can actually feel because the one with the sizing on it is a tiny bit rougher because I didn't sand it down, and because it's water-based, it does tend to raise the grain a bit. Okay, so there's the difference. There's Osmo. You can see I've got the O there for Osmo, and there's basically no difference. It's really made no difference. There's the water-based varathane again. Literally no difference. So it appears that sizing, at least in the mixture of 1 to 10, doesn't seem to make any difference. And frankly, I'm a bit leery of going stronger because when you go too strong, the glue is going to start blocking the finish from going in and penetrating at all. So it's just going to lay on top, which of course we don't want to do that. So anyway, the 1 to 10 apparently doesn't make any difference. So the purpose of the sizing was to sort of mute the finish from going in, to make it sort of less intense. And that would have been particularly useful on end grain because, as you know, when you put end grain, when you put finish on end grain. It's much darker than the rest of the wood, and it would have been nice for that to have worked on there, but none of this has. So if any of you have got some glue sizing tips that actually do work, I'd really like to hear about them, because that way we all learn. On a fairly regular basis, I get emails from people that say, my router table has a dip in it. And sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's both ways. And today I'm going to show you what causes it and what you can do about it. Here's my router table, and I have a straight edge on the top of it, and I have this piece of paper just folded up, and it's folded up into quarters now, but if I start off by just folding it in half, you'll see that it easily slides around there, but when it gets to the end, it won't slide anymore. See, it's stuck there. Same with this side, it's stuck down here, it won't slide anymore. I can even double it, and again, it moves around pretty readily in there, but when it gets closer to the edge, and that means, although it might be hard to see on video, there's an actual dip in there, and this one isn't that bad. Let me show you what causes it. Almost every router table is made out of MDF. Same MDF that you can buy at the lumber store. The difference with this is they put a laminate, a plastic laminate, or what we used to call arborite on top, and it's typically glued on top. Now what happens on the underside, they often do either very little or nothing on the underside of these tables. And what happens is moisture, because this is all wood fiber, everything is made out of wood fiber, including these magazines here, all made out of wood fiber, which means they still absorb moisture. And what happens, here's a perfect example. When wood fiber expands, this is an old cardboard cover you can see from the late 60s. And look at how nice and flat it lays. And that's because moisture can go in and out. It can go back and forth because there's no coating on it. But look at the new covers that they started making many years ago now. They took this cardboard and put a lovely plastic finish on it, and look at what happens. Now the moisture can't penetrate, so what happens, because there's dampness in the air, the wood fiber, which is basically cardboard here, it still absorbs moisture, but because it can't pass through, that wood fiber still has to expand, just like wood does, and when it expands, it has to do something, and in this case, it pushes the book. You've probably got books around like this at home, softcover books, where the covers never lay flat. They always stick up like that. And if you were to take that and dry that out, it would lay nice and flat, just like this one. And your router table is doing exactly the same thing. It's absorbing moisture slowly over time, and because it can't expand like this, it has to push, it still has to expand, and the only way it can expand is to move like this. And what makes it even worse is when you look, well, I can't pull the center out here, but you can see in here, see these slots in here? These are not coated. So there's the Achilles heel of almost every router table is where the plates go in. This is raw MDF, and it's really subject to absorbing moisture. So what can you do about it? Now, if you're using short boards, making boxes and smaller pieces like that, you probably won't notice it unless it's quite severe. But if you notice that parts of your router projects are not lining up properly, it could be that your router table is dipped. So smaller boards, typically, they don't matter so much. But look at this. This is a longer board, and I don't know if you can tell, but there's actually quite a wow in that. And this board is nice and straight. I just put it on the jointer. Where you'll be using something like this, if you're making doors, they'll be out of parts of it will be out of alignment, or where you're putting inserts in, they might not look quite right. They'll look like they're off a little bit. One of the things you can do, not with a piece of oak like this, but if they're thinner pieces of wood like this, you can use a feather board. And if your table doesn't have a slot like this to put a featherboard in, often you can just clamp them on there. So that's one of the things that you can do. And what that does, of course, is it puts pressure on the board so that that little bit of a wow, it can just sort of take that out. The pressure of the featherboard can do that. You have to be careful you don't put too much pressure on featherboard, but hopefully if your wood is small enough, you'll be able to do that. In terms of fixing the table, there's really nothing that you can do because you can't sort of rebend it back. There's two things you could do. You could replace the top, which is not out of the question. The other thing you could do if you had the time, you could put this in a dryer and dry it out, and it will come back to flat if you do that. And at that point, you could apply a laminate to the bottom, which is what should have been happened to most of these in the first place, to slow down. It's always going to absorb moisture, but if you put a laminate on the bottom there and seal this, it would reduce that speed that the moisture is absorbed. So, but that's what happens. That's why your router tables have a bit of a dip in some of them. The older ones will have more of a dip in them. And if you have a new one, you can expect that that's probably going to happen unless you seal it and slow down that process. I received an email from John Eric, and he said, can you use a kerf maker on a bandsaw? And I emailed him back and said, no, you can't, because there's no stop on a bandsaw. And then I thought about it overnight, and I emailed him back and said, yes, there is a way you can do that just by setting up a stop. So let me go take you to the table saw and show you how a kerf maker works, because it's just a little bit more open there. For those of you that are new, this is what a kerf maker looks like. And basically with this one, when you undo the wing nut there, you can put a piece of wood in, and this is the wood that will make the thickness of a slot that you might want to cut. So there's the width of the slot that I want to cut. And there's an example of where you might cut it in a board, where you cut a dado or a slot in there. And the way it works, on the end, there's a little nut bolt in there, a little screw in there, and that screw is used to measure the thickness of the blade. So basically, you measure the width of your blade and adjust the screw. Now mine's already set for the bandsaw because that's what we're going to do, but normally I would do that here. Then to set up how wide we're going to make that slot, and that's going to be that wide there, I have to take away the width of the blade, and that's why we have that on there. So basically all you do is set that up there, move that back there, and I've already got this set up, and I'm just using my featherboard with the adjustable stops on just to show you, because you need two stops. So there's the first stop, and the second stop is that one, and you put that back, and that aligns with the front of the kerf maker. So you're using there and there to measure those two stops, and then with that, you just take and run your board through one side, the other side, and then just nibble out the middle in between. That's how a kerf maker works. I'll put a link to that at the end of the video. So I'm back at the bandsaw now, and I'm using my fence, or my miter gauge, with it's got the two stops on it, and I've already set up everything, including the stop for the wood. So the wood can only go that far, and that was the thing that I thought was missing on that first email. Now this isn't the best, because it's really just a demonstration that we can do that. So there's one stop, and there's the other stop, and this stop I can only eyeball it because of course there's no stop here, and I can't adjust these. So I'm just going to eyeball this one to there, and then the second one I'll actually be able to use this stop on it. There you go, you can see that stop. So I'm eyeballing this one, and then I'm going to use that as a stop. So it's not going to be dead accurate, but it'll show that you can do it if I took the time to set up the stops properly. So let's start off with the first one. Look at that slake there. Ooh, that's a nice tight. Gee, that worked out well. You can see I already tried one and it wasn't, it was a little bit too tight, so I've had to readjust it. So it can be done. I don't know when or where you would use this, but by setting up a stop on your bandsaw, which we don't do very often, you can actually make slots, or I guess sort of mini dados. So there you go. Well, that concludes my video for today. And you know, some days even I learn things. I'm Colin for WoodWorkWeb. Thanks for watching.